Just an apology. The family agreed that we didn't want anyone speaking about and leading a service for David who didn't actually know him, because, man, you needed to know David to be able to truly say something about him. He was such an absolute, utter treat. So this means his parents will be taking charge of the proceedings today, which also means that there's going to be a lot of sobbing and crying, for which I apologize in advance. So please be patient and bear with us. We'll all get through it, and then afterwards we'll have a lovely cup of tea. So thank you. I just wanted to mention that the soundtrack that's playing with the slideshow is a short collection of some of David's favorite tracks. So that is also just sort of. If we can just bow our heads and open this service in the appropriate way. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done here on earth as it is in heaven. Father, we come before thee this morning, sad and deeply distraught, but nevertheless deeply grateful for the immense blessing that David has been in all our lives. We want to thank thee for giving David to us for the 27 wonderful years that we had him with us here in the flesh. Thank you, Father, for the extraordinary person David was and the immense joy he brought to everyone who he shared his life with. Thank you, Father, for blessing our boy so generously with intelligence, humor, and above all, so much love. Be here today with us, Father, here where 2 or 3 have gathered in thy holy name and where you have always promised to be. Enfold this gathering today in the comfort of thy holy embrace, and may the wonderful memories of this astonishing person we have come here together to remember and honor bring peace, comfort, and soothing to every broken heart. In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son and our Savior. Amen. I would first of all like to call David's father, Michael, to the front to share his memories and dedications to his son.
Right, good morning everybody. My name is Michael Golding and I'm David's dad. I've agonized over this speech for days, really not knowing how to convey the love I had for David, the love we all had for David, how proud I was to be his dad, my heartbreak over his passing, and my sorrow that he was denied the life he so richly deserved. I couldn't and still can't find the words, so I thought instead I'd take you through a series of photos of David as he progressed through his life, from his early childhood, culminating in our last trip to Amsterdam together last year, just before Christmas, and just sort of talk through it and give you a bit of a flavor for who David was. So if we can start with that, and hopefully this will all work. There we go. Yep, early childhood. So these are really just a string of like first, seconds, and thirds insofar as David was concerned. So the first photo here is, the first time I really got to hold David at the hospital. Please ignore the packet of Camel cigarettes. I did give up eventually. David in his first pram up at the top, in his first car seat, in the one on the right-hand side, and on his first trip to Cape Town to go and see his grandparents. Moving on, we have his first real Christmas. David is probably about 1.5 years old here. Here he is with 2 sets of his grandparents, my mother and father on the left-hand side, and Blomi and Rikus on the right. Next up, we have David in the garden. This is probably the first and last time I ever got him to do anything in the garden. It was just too much of an effort for Dave. David camping in the back garden. Again, he wasn't a big fan of camping, but it was okay if it was in the garden where he was close to the fridge. And then David sitting here with his 2 favorite stuffed animals and this concrete pig, which he had this massive affection for. Right, so David looking hot and bothered, but still managing to pull it off and look a little bit cool. That's at our holiday place in Tiostrand on the Wild Coast. Next one is David on his little motorbike and me on my slightly larger bike. I did eventually teach him how to ride a bike when he was about 15 years old, but it never really stuck. So he ditched the bikes, I stayed on them. Next one, this is the first of David's series of obsessions, and there were a few of these. This was the Thomas the Tank Engine phase, where he had practically every single Thomas the Tank Engine model, bit of kit, whatever, and it was all carried around in this purpose-designed bag. So that was the first one. There are a few more coming, but they're on subsequent slides. This is his first picture. I really like this one. This is David at our holiday home in the Drakensberg. It's at it was one of the Sun Hotel things. I don't know if you can see it, but you can probably see it. There's a slight diagonal on his forehead. In his rush to get to something, he'd slipped on the floor. This was about 9 o'clock at night. Broke the skin on his head, and we had to rush off to the Escort Hospital at like midnight to try and get it sorted out. So that was the Drakensberg. The next one, that's me, obviously with a bit more hair and decidedly less weighty. David and his cousin Max. This is probably David's second or third birthday party. We were all hiding out in my study, me from the other moms, and David and Max from the other kids. Needless to say, we were busted. We did have our photograph taken, and we were sent back to the party. It's not a first, second, or a third. The bottom one is just David being David, slouching out in my parents' garden. These are the obsessions or phases that I referred to. So the first one, that's David as Darth Vader. I think Darth was his favorite Star Wars character, and he wore that out and about almost everywhere he went. The next one is Robin. That was one of the superheroes. He quite fancied Batman, Teenage Ninja Mutant Turtles, Spider-Man, the Hulk, you name it. David had it, and he had no qualms whatsoever wearing it out in public. And the last one, that's an old Everton strip, but David had this fascination with football jerseys, rugby jerseys, you name it. And if he could get his hands on them, he took them and he wore them basically until they fell apart in the wash. Right, David's first tie, well, I guess it's not really his tie, it's my tie. I had to tie it for him, and that was probably the start of when he started to really take care as to how he looked. He was always very keen on looking smart, and this is where it all started. Next one is David on his first and last bike. Again, David and exercise didn't really talk together, but he looked pretty cool in his little Microsoft cycling kit. Again, walked around in it for days on end. Top right, I guess. Yep, top right. That's first lost tooth, and the bottom one is his first broken bone. I can't remember if this one was when he tripped and fell when he was kicking his shoes off, trying to get them over a curtain rail, or if it was at one of his parties where he slipped and fell, waiting to greet his guests. The other point to note here, and I've seen a lot of them on the reel behind us, is the cat. This is when David's sort of love for cats actually really started, and it's something that carried him through for a long time going forward. All good things have to come to an end. David had to go to school, so he had to start at the preschool, and David started off at the Montessori school. And here you can see him in the playground. It's one of their first Christmas functions. It was a little fashion show. His dedication, and finally his graduation certificate at the end of 2005. Following the preschool, David moved into big school, so to speak. And there's a couple of pictures here. The first one with his mom, Christelle, is at the start of the first day of school, looking fairly apprehensive. The one with a rather chubby me is at the end of his first day of school, and you can just see by his face that he's got this whole thing taped, and big school is a bit of a joke, and this is where he belongs. Last one, just a little graduation photo of David, which I thought looked quite cute. Right, from there, David moved on to Radford House, which was a school for high potential or gifted children. Again, first day of school, and he's looking pretty cool, quite relaxed. Next one, they had a James Bond function. I had to go out and hire him a tuxedo, and I had to take him there in this like drug dealer style sort of silver Merc at the time. We had to take him off in that, and he eventually won the Best Dressed Man award that evening. So he was pretty pleased with himself. And the last one is David being awarded a certificate for excellence in language and mathematics at the School for the Gifted Children. So David was at Radford House until towards the end of 2011. At that point, David relocated to the Western Cape with his mum and dad, and that's when we started our first long-distance relationship. We would have two of these, so it was on the phone backwards and forwards, flying backwards and forwards between Joburg and Cape Town, at least once a month, which is it's no mean feat when you consider that David was barely 12 years old when we started this arrangement. 2011 saw David join Reddam House Constantia, which is where you are now. The school very graciously has allowed us to use their facilities for David's memorial. David stayed until he completed his schooling in 2017, and he loved it here. He wasn't anything like me. I hated school. I left it like it was on fire, the same as that my articles of clerkship and. But here, David continued to excel at academics and debating, and he had some success at cricket, rugby, and as a water polo referee. Here he is lining up a kick for goal. I think this is on one of his last rugby matches. And there's the total look of disbelief and joy when it actually went over. As I said, David had a great time here. This is David posing for his final class photograph in his matric year. David not looking too happy with me. I made him buy a suit which is apparently way too big. I'm a bit behind the times. I didn't realize that suits now need to be quite tight. So he got the suit, wasn't happy with it, but you'll see he kept the tie because it appears in his next two graduation photos. There he is at the matric dance with his date, Natasha, at that time. David did really well at school. Again, not like me. You can see him over here, first chap on the second row. Seven distinctions, making him one of the Western Cape's top achievers. So, did really well. David was a proud member of the school's alumni association, and we are in discussions with the school to create a floating trophy in David's name and in David's honor to be awarded to a matriculant achieving excellence in one or more fields of study yet to be determined. And it's our hope that we will be able to award this trophy for the first time later this year. So after school, you have to go to university, unfortunately. And even though David was accepted into a number of prestigious universities in the UK, he elected to stay in South Africa and study at UCT. So the first photo is David. That's one of his sort of trademark grins. I mean, I always said that David could convey an entire conversation in a single look. This is David, unimpressed with being consigned to a dorm room at UCT. He lasted about a month before we had to pick him up and take him out and get him into a flat with his mates, which is where he stayed until COVID hit. Again, David continued to excel here. The middle photo, please note the tie. I got the suit wrong, but I got the tie right. That's David getting his Bachelor of Business Science with a double major in economics and law. I believe it was a first-class pass. And again, sporting a fairly aggressive-looking beard. The last photo on the far right is David graduating in 2024 with his Bachelor of Laws degree, thankfully without the beard, but still with the same tie. So that's David and his university career. David then needed to complete his articles, and he was fortunate enough to secure his articles at the firm of Boylow Incorporated in Paarl, where David completed his articles towards the end of last year. You can see him here with some of his colleagues and flashing off a suit, which would probably be better with my old tie in it. But anyway, that's that. And a photo of David being admitted to the High Court in April of this year. During this period, I returned to the UK together with my family in just after COVID, actually. And whilst I'd hoped that David would join us there at some particular point in time, it was clear that his heart was really here in South Africa, with his family and friends here. So we picked up our long-distance relationship again, visiting each other several times a year, burning up the phone lines, and just generally trying to make the best of the situation. These last few are a couple of photos of David's trips with us in 2025. The first tour in a place called Tenby in Wales, which is the only place in the UK where you can swim with only one wetsuit on. Everywhere else you need at least a dozen. The Tulip Farm, just down the road from our house in the UK. And the last couple here are from our trip to Amsterdam just before Christmas last year. First one is the first night. We did a canal cruise. David's looking very excited there because they're bringing out the beers and the cheese. Top right is the Hard Rock Cafe. The bottom one, which is the photo which we've been using as the holding slide, that was at a bar which had the gall to actually card David before serving him a beer. He was mortified. So was I. Heineken experience. I think there may be one in the reel where David's giving a scowl because he was forced to stand on the second place. He wanted to be number one on the podium, but didn't quite make it. So there's David there, the Heineken experience. Next photo is on the roof of the Heineken experience, drinking beer. The other one is another beer place called the Het Lager Huis. Most of the beer ideas were mine. They weren't David's. David wasn't much of a drinker. And lastly, just doing a little bit of sightseeing in Amsterdam. This is the last photo I have of David. This was on Christmas Day last year. David returned home on Boxing Day 2025, and I unfortunately didn't see him after that. I debated whether or not to put these last 3 slides on, but I'm going to do them anyway. So these are 3 things that you may not have known about David. The first one was that he was an Irish lord and landowner. A couple of years back in Northern Ireland, they started reforesting certain areas of land. In order to fund it, they would sell off parcels of land. And if you were silly enough to buy one of these parcels, they threw in the title of Lord or Lady of Ardmore, and you were entitled to one of 32 unique Irish tartans. We thought it was a bit of a joke. David thought it was fantastic, and he wore this hat for the rest of the holiday. The second one, I don't really need to say anything here. This is at Warwick Castle, Christmas of 2023. They all went ice skating. I was too scared. David eventually got the swing of it, and as you can see, his sister didn't. She struggled. And this last one came as a huge shock to me. David may or may not be Taylor Swift's biggest fan. I can't believe it. Judging by the look on his face, I think this is a bit of an inside joke. But on the flip side, we walked up and down the Albert Cape Market for most of a Saturday morning trying to find the gaudiest possible Taylor Swift jersey, and he's wearing it there, so who knows. So that's the end of the presentation. Just before I hand over to Chris, I just wanted to offer some brief, but I think fairly important acknowledgements and thank yous. Firstly, to David's mom, Christelle. You're a great mother to David and his best friend. I'll be forever grateful to you for everything you did for him and that you're with him until the very end, ensuring that he didn't pass away alone. For that, I thank you. Secondly, to David's step-parents, Catherine and Chris. Your respective contributions to David's life and the role you both played in molding him into the fine young man he became are significant and will not be forgotten. Chris, in particular, thank you for all the assistance and support in putting together these final arrangements for David. We couldn't have pulled it off without you. There's only 5 of these, so don't worry, this isn't an Oscar speech. Thirdly, to David's grandparents, both present and departed, David loved all of you. Greatly appreciate the life support and the guidance you provided, even if you didn't always follow it. And I know that you all doted on him. You'll see some of the photos coming up now. Some of the happiest photos of David when he's in the company of his grandparents. Fourthly, to David's siblings, Madison, Jack, Harry, his cousins, and in particular you, Max. You're a tightly knit bunch, providing each other with lots of advice, both wanted and unwanted, friendship and support, even if you did occasionally, in David's latest catchphrase, spike each other's cortisol levels. Pretty good one. I intend to wear that one out when I get back to the UK. You really shouldn't have to deal with something of this nature at this stage of your lives, and I'm deeply sorry for your loss. Jack and Max, it's been great reconnecting with you over our beer drinking sessions last week, and I look forward to a rematch. I'm probably going to win again, but it'll be great to see you try. Finally, to everyone else here in person, on the live stream, and anyone who I may have inadvertently forgotten, for which I apologize, thank you for being there for David, and thank you for being part of his life. Please don't forget him. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you too for yourself and Catherine and Madison and the wonderful influence that you had on his life too. I know that he loved you all deeply. Like all great and interesting people, my dear son David had very specific periods to his life, as his father Michael pointed out, definite, defined seasons. Like Picasso with his blue, rose, and analytic cubism periods, David was just emerging from his superhero period when I first met him as a 6-year-old in 2006. His superhero period had seen him go to preschool in a 2-piece suit and tie, with his Superman costume worn underneath, just in case I need it. As he would matter-of-factly explain to his doting mother. It was these eccentricities that didn't just make David such an interesting and lovable child, but were also an amazing reflection of what would prove to be an utterly prodigious intelligence. By the time he was exiting his superhero period, David's favorite hero had become Batman, precisely because Batman wasn't a superhero at all, but just an ordinary man It always struck me as important that this particular detail so appealed to David. It was also a topic he would discuss many times and one he would earnestly revisit with his own brothers when they went through that same stage. By the time he was 6, David had almost completely transitioned into his Star Wars period. Various colored lightsabers were sourced from literally every corner of the globe, and he took to wearing a black Darth Vader mask as his father showed in public that not only completely covered his face, but was also augmented with a voice-distorting mechanism, a rather disconcerting ensemble for anyone having the singular pleasure of meeting him for the first time. This period would always deliver some well-used and much-loved family sayings. Something David would contribute generously to over the years. Whenever his mother was speaking to me and my mind started wandering, he would smile and ask, thinking again of why they left that huge gaping hole in the Death Star, are you? And so, thinking of the Death Star became the way to gently mock the wandering mind of a husband. Taking my responsibilities as a stepdad rather seriously, I realized I had a parental duty to get David interested in rugby. And with the Blue Bulls doing particularly well in Super Rugby in the mid-2000s, David and I became committed Blue Bulls fans. As always, David developed a keen interest in all the minutiae surrounding the game and studiously collected every Blue Bulls jersey the franchise ever produced. Gladde hempies, as he liked referring to them. We also went to watch a few games at the Citadel of Loftus Versfeld, and I remember David taking great care to try and count all the white Toyota Hilux bakkies we saw en route to the stadium, as proof, he believed, of who the Blue Bulls' true supporters really were. David turned into a great lover of rugby and became an astonishing repository of vast amounts of rugby trivia that he could disgorge at will. He also played rugby at school, and while he was never destined to play Craven Week, he was the most amazing supporter his team could ever have hoped for, always rallying his team when things were going badly, which they mostly did. In his very last game, his team, as you saw in the previous slideshow, gave him the singular honor of taking the last penalty kick. Almost at the halfway line, there was no chance of him ever getting it over, but he stepped back undeterred, gave it a hefty boot, and there the ball sailed in an astonishing arc straight through the middle of the posts. It was utterly extraordinary, and all that was missing was a rousing Vangelis soundtrack. Look carefully at the slideshow that you see behind you, and you will see a delighted David just after that kick. Recently, David had taken to commenting large stretches of rugby matches we watched in Afrikaans, referring to players as a product van Linden Hoërskool or whatever school they went to, or die manne kuier weer agter die pale, or when a fracas broke out, daar ry die manne weer telefoonnommers uit. It was always such an infectious mix, his keen sense of humor and sharp wit, fueled by that astonishing intelligence. There's so much more I would like to say about David, most of which wouldn't mean much to most of you. His great love of the movie The Big Lebowski, with its colorful main character, the dude, a laid-back bowler and serial underachiever who just wants things his way, played by Jeff Bridges, and the dude's volatile ex-Marine bowling buddy, Walt Sobchak, who sees everything through the lens of Vietnam, played by John Goodman. At some point in the movie, Walter and the dude are in a tense bowling league game when a competitor, Smokey's toe crosses the foul line, and who then proceeds to insist on on claiming the score. This prompts Walter to pull out a pistol from his bowling bag, screaming that the score be marked 0. It's one of the film's most iconic scenes, blending Walter's hyper-serious military mindset with the absurdity of it all being over just a bowling scene. When a thoroughly shaken Smokey asks Walter if the threat of being shot was truly necessary, Walter turns to him, replying in deadpan as he carefully returns his pistol back to his bowling bag, "Smokey, this is not Nam, this is bowling. There are rules." David just loved it and liberally overused this and other sayings from the movie, as well as developing a love for Creedence Clearwater Revival from the soundtrack. As a matter of fact, David could quote long stretches of the movie script verbatim, ensuring that they would become firmly entrenched in our family law. And as long as these stories, memories, and sayings of David's are spoken of and used by us, the jokes about the Death Star and the quotes of the dude and his buddy Walter Sobchak, David lives on. And this is our family's task and our privilege towards David through the generations, as I'm sure his brothers and sisters And his sister will no doubt, and his cousins will no doubt pass these stories on to their own children one day, because they are, after all, just too good not to. From generation to generation, as the Jewish tradition teaches, passing on someone's name, teachings, and stories is to keep them alive, each generation carrying the previous one forward. In the Mexican culture, the dead are believed to return once a year on November 1st and 2nd, provided they are remembered. Small altars built, stories told, and the favorite foods and belongings of the deceased are shared. The dead are never gone as long as someone keeps their memory alive. And here locally in the Amakosa culture, death is not viewed as an ending, it is merely a transition. The deceased become an ancestor, an Inzanyanya, who continues to exist in the spiritual realm and watches over the living family. It is a comforting thought, and how I choose to think of David, one which also strangely finds much foundation in our own Christian faith. Because if anything, David had all the fruits of the Spirit Paul speaks of in his letter to the Galatians, those core characteristics every Christian should exhibit. And while I know no one dares speak ill of the dead in David's case, and anyone who knew David will attest to, he truly did have every one of these characteristics in absolute spades. David loved selflessly and unconditionally, his parents, his siblings, his extended family, his friends, and he was loved by everyone who he ever came in contact with, living up so splendidly to his Hebrew name of beloved. David was joyous, and it gives me such great comfort to think how deeply happy he was when he crossed over. David experienced great peace. He had an inner calm and wholeness when he was with his family. Especially when shuffling around the house with his cat in his ridiculous pink Crocs and absurd Taylor Swift t-shirt. David was patient and long-suffering when explaining a complicated maths problem to his two brothers, or when speaking to his mother or myself when we ourselves were highly agitated. David was kindness and goodness itself, with an astonishing moral clarity about life, which I suspect comes from his father. He was loyal and reliable, as any of his friends can attest to, especially the great care he took with everyone who was going through a tough time, or just how he called his sister in the UK every single day. He was gentle, whether with his brother, his mother, his grumpy stepdad, or his beloved cats. And David had amazing self-control and was always so incredibly slow to anger. All these fruits of the Spirit David had. And it had me thinking over the past difficult 2 weeks since his passing, how there now is such a special responsibility weighing down on my own shoulders, to honor those characteristics in my own life, to live up to this wonderful example David set. How tomorrow is not a given, as his sudden passing attests to. How I should not allow myself to become embroiled in pointless, fleeting behaviors I might regret, engaging in petty squabbles, carrying grudges, or cultivating personal slights, because I know David passed without a single regret. And it was the example David set and the way he lived his life that makes David qualify so resoundingly and magnificently for what the Apostle Paul speaks of in Romans 8 when we read, "We know that in all things God works for the good, for those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And we know that nothing, not life, not death, not any grief, nor any darkness, can ever separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord." David was God's gift to us. He was blessed with 4 doting parents, but especially a mother who had such a close and special relationship with him, and a father for whom David meant absolutely everything. David was blessed with 2 loving brothers, Jack and Mency, a besotted sister Madison, a cousin Max who loved him deeply, proud grandparents, an extended family, friends and colleagues who all loved him dearly. David was truly such a blessed child. But most importantly, David was truly made in the Lord's image, loved before the foundations of the world. Yes, the suffering we feel now is real and it is heavy, but the Apostle Paul tells us that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed. David is held in that glory, held in the arms of a God who has not forgotten him, and who has not forgotten us, because we will see David again. The Spirit of God moves through our pain even now, interceding for us in ways we cannot put into words. We are not alone in this. We were never meant to carry this alone. And the love that God has for David and for us is greater than any sorrow, any question, and any darkness this world can bring. Hold on to this. Nothing that has happened and nothing that will come can ever separate our beloved David from the love of God. He is safe, he is loved, and yes, one day we will see him again. As the poet Henry Scott Holland writes, "Death is nothing at all, it does not count. I've only slipped away into the next room." Nothing has happened. Everything remains exactly as it was. I am I and you are you. And the old life that we lived so fondly together is untouched and unchanged. Whatever we were to each other, that we are still. Call me by the old familiar name. Speak of me in the easy way which you always used. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed at the little jokes that we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without an effort, without the ghost of a shadow upon it. Life means all that it ever meant. It is the same as it ever was. There is absolute and unbroken continuity. What is this death but a negligible accident? Why should I be out of mind because I am out of sight? I am but waiting for you for an interval, somewhere very near, just around the corner. All is well, nothing is hurt, nothing is lost. One brief moment and all will be as it was before. How we shall laugh at the trouble of parting when we meet again. Goodbye, my dear son David, from this world. At least. See you in the next. Yes, the dude now well and truly abides. Right, I'm glad I got through that. I'd now like to call David's mother, Christelle, up and to read out the family dedication.
So I specifically didn't prepare anything to say today because I knew I wouldn't be able to. I just wanted to read something that my friend Berdine sent to me last night, and that is that David's name, like Chris says, means beloved, but it also means well loved. And I want to say thank you for everybody that went to the trouble of coming here today and flying in from far, and his wonderful, wonderful friends that made him feel loved. In the Bible, it is said that David was chosen by God for his heart, exemplified courage, obedience, loyalty, repentance, and patience. And he was so patient with me, his annoying mother, and he used to make me coffee in bed and come and sit with me every single day to talk about what are we going to do today and things and life. He was a he is a wise soul. I've got a few short things to read. One is from my mother, Oma Blowie and Oupa Rikus, a short poem, beautiful words. It says, "Goodbye, David. Heaven has called upon you today, leaving so many words to say. I closed my eyes for a moment, and suddenly a man stood where a boy used to be. I will always carry you in my heart. You have given us so many reasons to be proud of the grandson you have become. We will love you forever. Rest in peace, Oma Blowie and Oupa Rikus." And then his beloved sister Hannelie. "To David, from your Aunt Hannelie, there are souls that pass through this world and leave it forever changed. Not through grand gestures or loud declarations, but through the quiet, steady warmth of whom they simply are. David, you were one of those, definitely. And the silence you have left behind is louder than anything I have ever known. How do I find words to describe someone who had none of the flaws the rest of us carry? How do you summarize a heart that was so genuinely good? So I will say what is true, and that is that you were the most beautiful soul I've had the privilege of knowing. And I mean that with every part of me. You were so incredibly kind in a deep and in a humble way. You noticed people, you were interested in the details of their lives, in what mattered to them, in how they were really doing. You made everyone around you feel like they were worth knowing and worth hearing, worth your time. And that is a rarer gift than most people ever receive in a lifetime. And you were always first to answer your phone or call us on our birthdays. So incredibly dedicated that it was you. Your humor was unique, quirky, intelligent, and made us smile in a way only you could. The way you saw the world, just slightly different to the rest of us, always a few steps ahead, left us better every single time after I chatted to you. We spoke often, and I would give anything for just one more of those conversations. You were always there, always present, always ready to engage. I loved talking to you, and you were so selfless with your time. And now the phone is quiet, and I'm incredibly sad that you left us so young. To Jack, Mercy, and Madison, he was the brother you deserved, and he loved you in the way only David could love. To Max, you lost your person, I know. Your best friend and cousin. Since you were babies together, you were inseparable. I'm sorry, Max. And there are no words to even try to describe the loss you and his siblings must now feel. I grieve alongside you, and I know your heart is broken. Dave, his aunt always called him Dave. Dave, you touched so many lives, so many people sitting somewhere right now with a Dave ache in their heart, and they do not quite know how to carry that. We all adored you, and we will still adore you. And to David's parents, Christelle and Michael, and your bonus parents, Chris and Catherine, you were gifted an angel for 27 years. I know David will find a way to let you know he's here, in a breeze, in a bird, in a song that plays at the right moment. He will be there. We all need to know David is still here. Look at us from where you are, dear David. Show us that you are with us. We love you so much. The world is so much less without you. Rest softly, David, always and in everything. I won't be able to read the full thing from my father. I'm going to highlight some of it, but basically he's writing again to his grandson, a tribute to an angel, which David really was. And he writes, in the congregation of angels in heaven, they had a youth day, because David died on youth day, get together. And they considered his CV, and David had the best CV, because from love, friendliness, helpfulness, appearance, intelligence, caring, responsibility, all these, David always got 10 out of 10. So they chose him as their most dedicated and committed angel. And then just the last few bullets of what my dad says. This is David, unselfish, always controlling his own feelings to entertain others, presenting yourself with a smile on the face, accept responsibility for things, spreading love all over your path where you went, consider others more than yourself. Always, my dad developed a concept that says considerasie vir ander mense. And David reminded us all about that, nicely in Afrikaans, considerasie vir ander mense, David. And he was the best to be helpful wherever he could be happy, and he fulfilled with himself. I'm happy to say that David was happy at home, that he had a happy childhood with all of us. And I'm privileged to have had him for 27 years. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
I would like now to call upon Boy Lowe from the law firm, where David did his articles from 2024 to 25, and where he was still consulting at the time of his passing, to come forward and say some words.
Can you hear me at the back? I had trouble hearing all the people before me, so I'm just making sure. In a law firm, you have an intake of article clerks, or as they nowadays called, candidate attorneys every year. That candidate attorney that enters his articles in a law firm then gets allocated to a lawyer, to a practicing lawyer, for his training for the next 2 years during that article period. That training is quite a story, as the lot sitting behind there could attest. That training entails things like how to apply the law that you've studied at university, how to use the law as a tool in formulating advice to clients, how to think and formulate your thoughts before you open your mouth to speak, how to formulate your thoughts in advice to clients, when to speak, when not to speak, how to behave in a meeting, when to smile, when not to smile. And it goes into sort of minute details. So as you can imagine, during that 2-year period, when the article clerk works with his or her principal, it becomes quite an intimate affair. Not always pleasant. It's like a marriage. Sometimes it's like music. It works very well. Other times it's average, and other times it's very bad. But that's the way that life goes when you do your articles. I had to work out yesterday that I've now been practicing as a lawyer for the last 38 years. And if I do the rough maths, that means that for every one of that 38 years, I had 1 or 2 article clerks, sometimes 3 assigned to me, and then they rotate. So you would have one for 6 months, that person would then rotate to another lawyer. So applying that maths, I had well in excess of 100 article clerks coming across my path. You can see what it looks like on top here. Of that huge number of people, there's only really a handful that make a special connection with you, where you form a special bond, and where that becomes a person on a different level in your life, and you always remember them. What make a situation or a relationship like that so special? And I had to think long and hard about this yesterday. That foundation comes from a relationship that is built on a shared value system, first of all. It's respecting the other person's intellect. It's respecting that person's integrity, or that person having integrity. That person's ability to read the temperature in the room, as we always say. That person's ability to just understand the world. Not everybody has the ability to understand the way the world works. That person's grit, and that person's compassion for his fellow human beings. Now, in my life, David is one of those persons. David was and will always be one of those handful where we had that very, very special relationship. So, if I have a few more minutes, Chris, I want to share sort of 2 different perspectives with you, if you would bear with me. One is the perspective clients had of David, and the other one is perspective of our personnel. Some of them are sitting at the back there. So I would start with the clients. We were, at the time of David's death, we were working on a matter where we interacted a lot with the guy in the UK. He was the financial director of that business, Richard Wilkinson. he wrote to me, "Boy, I just heard the devastating news, Ray David. My thoughts are with him, his friends, and his family. He was an inspiration and an absolute joy to work with. I absolutely loved working with him and felt protected whenever we worked together. He'll be sadly missed." I would say what a testimony. The other one, on a slightly lighter note, is a guy also called David Sanclement. He's a Spaniard. We dealt with him also a lot over the last sort of year or so. And he was called David S, and the other David was David G, because we were in lots of meetings where if somebody says David, both of them would sort of react. So he wrote to me, he's obviously watching soccer in Mexico. He wrote to me, "Boy, it's with shock and sadness I read this terrible news from Mexico. I cannot say a lot other than I will pray on Sunday for his soul and for his family. God bless him." Now, on a slightly lighter note, this David Sanclement, Anu, my one partner sitting at the back there, knows this. David was a watch, or is a watch collector, David Sanclement. And every time we saw him, he wore a different watch from his collection. And he really had a huge collection. So one day in a meeting towards the end of last year, when he visited South Africa, I observed that he was wearing a Rolex that I, in any event, have never seen in my life. So obviously David Golding also observed that. So somewhere towards the end of the meeting, when we were sort of talking and saying goodbye to each other, I told him, "David, it's a nice watch." And he looked at us, and he was sort of almost embarrassed that we noticed this watch. And he started telling us, this is a watch that used to belong to his grandfather and then his father. And as he was finishing his sentence, David Golding told him, "Yeah, and that watch," and he gave him the history of that particular Rolex, which is one of 100 ever made during a particular period of time. And David Golding could tell him exactly the history on a watch like that. And David Sanclement just sat there because that was the first guy ever that could do that. So that's that bit. Then turning to our staff, some of this is in Afrikaans. As you know, we in Paul, we're very Afrikaans. Doing this in English even is a bit of a stretch for me. So in no particular order, and this is not everybody, Bianca at the back there selected what I'm going to read here. So the first person is Delana. Delana is in our property department. She's a senior conveyancing assistant. Delana says, "David was soft-hearted, friendly, caring, and a warm person with a good sense of humor. He stood strong on his beliefs and the golden deposits which he made in our lives / hearts, our legacy which he leaves behind that will forever be part of us." Then Charlene, that works with me, so she's my assistant. She worked a lot with David. Charlene doesn't use many words ever. She says, "Ek het hom nooit moeilik of kwaad gesien nie. Baie lekker gewees om saam met hom te werk." Then Eloise, who's a senior commercial secretary in our firm, that works with Anu, that worked with David a lot. Eloise says, "David had a calming effect on us as colleagues, but also on clients. An EQ of at least 70 years. No ego, no need for competition. At ease with himself. He did not sweat the small stuff. David's sense of humor, well developed and sophisticated. No explanation necessary, and he could easily laugh at himself. All of the above linked together, forming an extraordinary person and colleague, whom we miss dearly." Next one is Lisa. Lisa, I should be careful not to look at you now. This is in Afrikaans. So Lisa and David did their articles together. They over the same 2-year period. And for a year, I think, Lisa, you were sharing the same office with only a screen divider in between the two of them. So I think you get to know each other reasonably well during that time. So Lisa says, David was in kort en baie kind persoon. Hy was besorgd oor mense om hom en was gelukkig as hy weet hy kon 'n positiewe verskil in iemand anders se dag maak. Al was dit deur sy snacks te deel of rond te loop en vir iemand anders hulle printing en leë waterbottels te gaan haal. David was geduldig, bereidwillig om met mense mense om hom altyd bo homself te stel. Hy was altyd bereid om kollegas te help al was hy self onder druk. David was 'n bok vir sports en het altyd eerste ja gesê vir nuwe dinge. So was hy die eerste manlike persoon wat by ons firma in kombuistee bygewoon het. En hy het saam genight run met die span, al is hy nie eers 'n groot hardloper nie. Anthony, one of our partners, he's not here today, he's in the Kruger Park. Anthony says, today we remember a remarkable colleague whose intelligence, dedication, and tireless work ethic left a lasting impression on everyone who had the privilege of knowing him. Through David's life was cut short, far too short, his warm conversations, vibrant spirit, and the impact he made will be remembered with gratitude and deeply missed. Anu, one of our other partners that worked with David a lot, says David possessed a conscientiousness that came through in his work. He had the ability to understand legal questions and, more importantly, the ability to frame arguments in a concise manner. The ability to write with brevity and precision is the hallmark of an insightful legal mind. Then Bianca, last one, Bianca also did articles over the same 2-year period as David. Bianca says, David had many wonderful qualities, an incredibly sharp mind, a kind heart, and a way of carrying himself that made everyone else around him feel at ease in his presence. But what I remember when I think of David is firstly the fact that he adored cats, and secondly, his wonderful sense of humor. Many may know that David's cat was called Jeffrey. However, imagine my surprise when David jokingly referred to the cat as young Mr. Epstein. That is exactly the type of person David was. Someone who spoke on serious issues with such sharp wit that it made everything feel just a little lighter. And then Chris. Additionally, what never fails to make me smile is that despite generally being smartly dressed, David bought himself a pair of pink bright Crocs during our second year of articles, the ones that you referred to, I think, for no other reason than to spark a little joy. And that is the David I will carry in my heart. In conclusion, I would like to thank 4 people. First of all, not in order of importance, obviously. Emery, Botha, Christelle, Michael, and Chris. Emery for facilitating David doing his articles with our firm. Today we thank you. And then Christelle, Michael, and Chris for sharing the very special young man with us for the last 2.5 years. It was our privilege. Thank you.
Thank you, Boy. Thank you, Boy, and thank you so much for the mentor that you were and the friend that you were to him. He spoke a lot to us about you. He spoke a lot to me about you, and I know that you made a deep impression on him, and that you formed him as a professional, and we will always be deeply grateful for that. Thank you so much. I would now like some of David's close friends to come forward and say some words about this very special boy. Sean Rose, and then Blake Shapiro, and in conclusion, June Gray. Thank you.
For those of you, can you hear me fine in the back? Cool. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sean Rose, and I had the privilege of knowing David and being one of his closest friends. Before I start, I just want to thank Mr. Gitlin for being so accommodating and allowing us to use the Pecan Auditorium, and everyone who is involved in organizing and putting this all together. Michael, Christelle, Chris, Catherine, Madison, Jack, Harold, Hanali, Max, all family, everybody. I'm so incredibly sorry for your loss. It's quite something. In the last 2 weeks or so, I've learned so much about David, spending so much time with all of you, even just the brief encounters that we've had. It's easy to see why David was who he was. He embodied all of you so well, almost I'd say a perfect combination of all your best traits. Christelle, David and I would always laugh about whenever we wanted to see each other on a Saturday morning for a coffee, that we would need to first ask permission from our mothers. He adored you. You were his best friend. He sent me this message on the 21st of June, 2025, and I quote, "One day I want to go to the UK with my mom in the summertime and watch a test at Lord's and then go and watch a few days of Wimbledon. That's ultimately what I'm working for, I guess, to be able to do that." He loved you so much. He was so happy being back home these last several months working remotely and all of you being close together. Michael, David loved you too. Whenever he was in deep thought or mulling over a decision or something significant, he would always tell me, "I spoke to my dad," and then he would have that certainty to move forward. He leant on you, and you were his sounding board for advice. He trusted your judgment. This even trickled down to me in May 2024 when I was looking to buy my first car. And David told me, and I quote, "A big piece of advice my dad told me, always assume a salesman and or a mechanic is lying to you." He told me how he loved doing a traditional Christmas at yours and what a lovely time he had last year with your trip to Amsterdam with Madison. Chris, I can't tell you how many times David would bring you up in conversation over our lengthy coffee chats. He admired you and looked up to you. He learned a tremendous amount from you and had the utmost respect for you. He loved you dearly. Jack, David sent me a picture of you a couple of months ago when you made your first team debut for Saks, for rugby. He was so incredibly proud of you. Mency, David would tell me it was time for you to come have a coffee and a chat with us, often citing that he believes that you have an IQ in the 170s. Madison, it was so lovely spending time with you yesterday and getting to know you a bit better. I see so much of David in you. Hanali and Max, David told me so many stories that there's too many to share here now, but he always had the best time when we went to go see you guys in Johannesburg. I felt it imperative to share and speak about David's family life, as family was the most important thing in his life. And now I'd like to explain who David was to me and what he meant. David came to Reddam as a young lad of about 11 years old. I remember it vividly. We always had a close-knit grade and everyone was quite friendly with each other, but I'd say we only started to become close in high school, around grade 8 or 9, but particularly in grade 10. If I think back, it was probably our shared love for history and economics, but especially history. David had Mrs. Stoltz, and Mrs. Stoltz would have loved to be here today. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it in person, but I think she is watching, and David had so much affection and adored you greatly, Mrs. Stoltz. He had it for grade 10, 11, and 12, and I had Mr. Buerter for history in grade 10, 11, and then I had Mr. Stoltz in matric. We would often compare notes, see what we were being told by each teacher. At break, we would sometimes get lost in the subtleties and nuances of the particular section that we were currently doing. And by the way, we still did this 11 years later. The last time I saw David, we spoke about his history investigation that he did on John F. Kennedy. I often thought to myself, goodness me, this guy knows an insane amount about everything. And the amazing thing was how his brain worked in synthesizing this information. He was a remarkably intelligent person, but not just raw IQ. He had the perfect balance of emotional intelligence to match it, the stuff you just can't teach in a classroom. This was really the preamble of what was to come. Fast forward a few years and we are out of school and had kind of lost touch a bit, but reconnected properly at the end of 2018 and at the end of 2020, January 2021, where we had about a 3.5-hour coffee chat and a long catch-up. From this moment onwards, there were few times when David and I didn't talk in a week. David quickly became one of my closest friends. How he looked out for me, cared for me, checked in on me all the time, especially when I had some testing times. He was there. He didn't just say it, he did it. We spoke about absolutely everything. For example, there's a time last year when we went for our customary 2-month flat white session at Loading Bay, and somehow the first 45 minutes was David speaking to me about time zones. I just want to say it again, time zones. I didn't know that it would be such a contentious topic, but we went down that rabbit hole, and well, it is what it is. But there isn't a rabbit hole that we didn't go down together. He knew absolutely everything. His general knowledge and overall range and adaptability was impressive, as well as his observational skills and attention to detail. There's not much he didn't know. Another example was his knowledge, as Boy mentioned earlier, about watches, and not just broadly, but how the movements would work, the mechanics behind it. He would tell me why Rolex, specifically from 1989 to 2005, was the best peer and why they made their best models during that time. Sports, from cricket to tennis, rugby, football, golf, you name it. Cinema, music, TV shows, even lapel choices on jackets, different tie knots, collar choices on shirts, you name it, and we had spoken about it. And he had infinite knowledge on each topic. And we definitely did not adhere to the notion of not discussing politics or religion. In fact, that's pretty much all we spoke about at times. And to quote G.K. Chesterton, I never discuss anything except religion and politics because there's nothing else to speak about. That was David and I in a nutshell. David was the most benevolent, empathetic, compassionate, dear person you could come across. He pretty much embodied all the best virtues a person can have. He always checked in on me, deliberately and intentionally. He genuinely cared about my family too, always asking after my mum and my younger brother Luke, whom David was also friends with. A fact I'm very, very proud to say is that David was our very first lawyer. He read and approved my first ever employment contract and my little brother Luke. He joked that I would receive an invoice shortly, and I can tell you that it never arrived. It is nice to have a lawyer friend. David had absolutely everything. He was so special, so talented, and despite all of his achievements, which there were a lot, his humanity, his soul, his love for his friends and his family, that is true wealth. Not a bigger house or a fancier car, that contentment within your own skin, which he had in abundance. These last 15 years, it has been the privilege of a lifetime to call David Thomas Golding my friend and my brother. To end off, I want to share a quote from Robert Kennedy Jr., who suffered great loss in his life. He asked his mother a question when his brother Michael died. He asked whether the hole that people leave in you when they die, whether it gets any smaller. And his mother told him, it never gets any smaller, but our job is to grow ourselves bigger around that hole. And the way that we do that is by incorporating the best virtues of those people that we lost into our own character. And in making that effort, we build ourselves, we build our character, and we give those people a kind of immortality because we're thinking every day how to improve ourselves by incorporating the lessons of their lives and the virtues that they displayed. And at that time, we grow ourselves big into bigger people. And when we do that, the whole gets proportionately smaller. Through the mercy of God, may he rest in peace. God bless you all.
Can everyone hear me fine at the back? Cool, thanks. I always assumed the speech that I'd give about David would be at his wedding. This isn't half as much fun, but I see that I'm already starting wrong. Because I never called him David, except as a joke. David was for his family and his colleague and his girlfriends, and I think we'd both have felt awkward if he'd heard me using it. The day I met him in grade 6, I was 11, he was already 12, I noticed that Dave was written on his pencil case in big childish capitals. And I asked him if that was the name he preferred. But it turned out that someone else had written it there. I think it was his cousin Max, if memory serves. I don't know why he wrote that, he said. I'm not a Dave, I'm a Davy. And so I called him Davy, though as it turned out, he was okay with Dave too. I think maybe he wanted a new name for a new school. But Davy suited him. To me, he'll always be Davy. To me, there's always been something a little bit silly and a little bit old-fashioned about the name. I felt at times like it was more appropriate to a Victorian child than a 6'1" attorney, or 6 foot and some change, as he would correct me. But then that was just like him, to not even take his own name seriously. He would also, I imagine, have disapproved of funerals on principle. Too serious, too somber. But this, I suppose, was the great irony about him, that he was so hilariously cynical about the world, and yet treated the people he cared about with utter sincerity. I'm lucky enough to say that Davy was my best friend. He was the best friend that I ever had. I'd like to think that I was his best friend too, but the funny thing is, I think a lot of people in his life feel this way, and I want to try and explain why that is. One reason was the way that he communicated with you. He was a prolific, relentless texter. He wrote you paragraphs and paragraphs. He told you in excruciating detail about his errands to the traffic department, about how the descaling feature on his second best coffee machine had broken, and how he'd managed to fix it with a toothpick. I think I heard that story more than once, actually. And about what he thought the true impact of Ardennes Forest was for World War II. But he didn't do this in a narcissistic way. Nothing made him happier than when you responded in kind. He really wanted to know about you and your life down to the driest minutiae. He wanted your views on the relative merits and pitfalls of crew socks. He wanted to know what kinds of pens you preferred to use. And he did this for all of his friends. For I don't know how many people, he was the person they spoke to most, more than their own parents or their partner. I could say a lot of things about his humor or intelligence. There's a lot to say about that. But I think that this was Davy's most wonderful characteristic. His capacity to give a shit, to really give a shit about the people he cared about. It made you feel anointed, that you were uniquely important to the most interesting person in the room. And this is what drew people to him. I witnessed it firsthand, 15 years, but I've been thinking a lot about how to explain this part of him, this concern with details and the details for everyone's lives. And if you'll forgive the corniness, the word I've landed on is love, because what really is love, except for a genuine concern with the details of another person's life? He loved us, and he loved us so well. I wish that I could have explained this to him, because in my experience, people are often unaware of their best characteristics. I think we have a tendency to discount the things that come most naturally to us. But I can imagine that if I tried to explain it to him, he would have felt a little bit awkward and looked down and softly said thanks, Because one of the few things that can be said against Davy is that he didn't take compliments especially well. He didn't know what to do with them, though he doled them out regularly and genuinely. But I did tell him that I loved him, and I'll always be glad about that. Of course, being men, we couldn't say it to each other often, only on birthdays or after especially serious conversations. And of course, we had to say it in a manly way. I love you, bro. And of course, I wish I'd said it more now. As it is for everyone, there are a million things I wish I could have said to him and done with him. But if I could have one more day with him, I wouldn't want to spend it doing something dramatic, like swimming the English Channel or hiking Machu Picchu. I don't think he'd have climbed Machu Picchu if you'd paid him. Too much outdoors, too much exercise, too much foreign food. No, I think I'd want one of the afternoons from when we were in law school together, when we decided that the Foundations of South African Law lecture just wasn't that important, that we could always just do the readings, and that really the important thing was buying an iPhone cable at Cavendish, and buying this iPhone cable actually meant spending 3 hours drinking bottomless filter coffee at Mug and Bean. Because this, I think, was Davy's true gift, to imbue the most ordinary things with the magic of his presence. I wish I could explain what it was like to experience this, what the light of it was like. It was a kind of vitality that he had. And as F. Scott Fitzgerald writes in The Crack-Up, of all the natural forces, vitality is the incommunicable one. Vitality never takes. You either have it or you haven't it, like health or brown eyes or honor or a baritone voice. Well, Davy had it. He had it in spades. So many people, and especially at this age, stand around waiting for their real lives to happen. What's going on now isn't really our life, we think. Our real life will start as soon as we get that job or some money or move to Japan. But Davy didn't do that. It's trivial to say, but difficult to recognize that, of course, our real lives consist in the going to Mug and Bean, in the buying of the iPhone cable. And the best measure I can think of for vitality is how well we immerse ourselves in these day-to-day details. So if there's anything that gives me comfort now, it's how good Davy was at doing that. He didn't spare himself waiting for another more glorious life to happen. He didn't even spare himself for himself. He spent his time and his words and his energy and his brilliant mind on anyone who asked. And I was lucky enough to be so used to this, to be so used to him. And I think I'm only just starting to appreciate how much I relied on him for the small things and the big things, and in more ways than I can say. So there's no getting around how shit this is. Or to give a more eloquent phrase, the one that the writer and classicist Anne Carson used for the death of her brother is overtakelessness, that which cannot be gotten round, cannot be avoided or seen to the back of. I think this is right. It is overtakeless. And I found it difficult to reach any conclusion except that the world is a permanently poorer one than it was 2 weeks ago. But as Carson goes on, grief must nevertheless be carried or fashioned into a thing that carries itself. We can mourn, she says, by shaping, weighing, testing, hollowing, plugging, and carrying towards the light. For me, this means, among other things, to keep talking about him, to keep thinking about him, to remember his patented frown and his up-to-no-good smile, and to keep using his more ridiculous phrases. Like that poem about Shakespeare goes, if something good is endorsed, if the room must settle down, please, if something tasty is milk, then we are quoting Davy. And if there's one last thing that I'd like to say to him, I think it would be what Nick Carraway said to Gatsby. You're worth the whole damn bunch put together.
Afternoon, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Dune, and I've had the privilege of being friends with David since he came to Reddam. I'm also not great with my words, so please bear with me. But David would have loved the fact that his one dyslexic friend was up here giving a speech for him. You know, I'm an only child, so David was pretty much a brother to me. Our friendship was always based off loyalty, laughter, and a lot of banter. David would always go out of his way for other people. He really cared for his friends. He would always go to initiate plans and always ensure everyone would follow through, especially if he was the only one that actually wanted to do the plan. David went through lots of different fixations and phases through his life, from forcing the entire friendship group to watch the Barbie movie and calling it the greatest cinematic experience of all time. And for those of us that said the movie was rubbish, he just said that we don't understand the difficulty of a woman in a man's world. His obsession with the Big Lebowski, he even became ordained online as a Judas priest and insisted in officiating my future wedding. His latest fixation, which he would send me thousands of reels on Instagram about, was going to a lad's trip to China and North Korea. And who could forget his love for premium, specifically the Rico Classico, and it has to be upsized. Most of my memories of David are more of the simpler times. The quiz nights, which he would carry me every single time, watching cricket at Newlands every New Year's, and playing Mario Kart, which might be the only thing that he wasn't talented at. What I miss most about David isn't just one thing. It's that he won't be here for the memories still to come, the big moments and the times we should have shared together. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those kind words. And I was just sitting and listening to everyone talk, and I was just thinking, I was wondering, did we ever say that to David? Did we say all of this to David when he was alive? Did we actually make the effort to say this to him? And maybe that's the lesson to us all here today, that maybe we should tell this to each other while we are still here. I just wanted to find out if there's anyone else that would like to say anything before we conclude. No one else? Thank you. Then I think it would just be remiss of us to not extend some words of thanks to everyone who carried us, the Burgess and the Nudea and the Golding family, through the past 2 very difficult weeks. Firstly, thank you to Michael and to Catherine and to Madison. It's been a rough ride, but you guys have been amazing. Thank you for everything, and thank you for playing such an amazing role in David's life. We eternally indebted to you. A special thanks to Christelle's friend Emery Botha for driving through from Paarl every day and just being there. All the Landbeweegblad staffers, Karine van Wyk, Lynn Serfontein, Reza Clifford for all the layout work, and Nelia Richter for being the patient go-between. All the generous food, gifts, and flowers from everyone. You really have no idea how much it all meant to us. Arina Duplessis, our food editor at Landbeweegblad, for the huge amounts of home-cooked meals and lovely sweet treats when we needed them most. Marie Lowe, Dale Nias, and Edmund Bekes from Excel Events, who so graciously put together this event today at the very last minute when we weren't capable of doing so. All David's friends, for all their support, their visits and kind messages. Then all the Golding, Burgess, and Nudea family members who jumped on planes without a second thought to come and support us, as well as all our friends across the country and globe who prayed for us, thought of us, and sent messages of comfort. Then David's alma mater, Reddam House, Constantia, who so generously provided the venue today, and especially to the headmaster, Alex Gitland, and Michelle Creamer for all the arrangements and so graciously accommodating us here today. Then also for James Moore and everyone else who supported us so selflessly during the horror of the accident scene, and Flavor Catering for the food today, and Constantia Berg Funeral Home. Can we then, in conclusion, just please bow our heads and close with a word of prayer before you are welcome to join us for some more refreshments. Dear Father who art in heaven, thank you for having been here today at this gathering. We now commit David into thy holy care. Be with everyone in the next few days, weeks, months, and years as we get to a life without the physical presence of David. We pray for his special comfort for those who were closest to him, his mother Christelle, his father Michael, his siblings, Jack, Harold, and Madison, his cousin Max, his step-parents, and all his extended family and friends. We pray that you might keep David alive in our minds by never allowing the memories and stories he so loved to fade. May you help us to never ever forget them and him. Please keep your hand over everyone now as they return to their homes. Thank you so much, Father, for this wonderful blessing David has been in our lives, and we thank you for this astonishing grace towards us. In thy holy name we thank thee. Amen. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you so much for everyone that made the effort to be here. I don't think you can ever imagine what it means to us. Please join us for refreshments, cup of coffee, something to eat before you head back out. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you.
you.
Amen.